Hello, and welcome to the 10th episode of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
And today we're talking about God. So a bunch of ancient ideas on the existence of God.
Approximately a half hour of blasphemy. Blasphemy?
Yes. This
Straight
is
ahead.
by far the most interesting chapter to me.
Really?
I really like this chapter. So I was just saying last episode, I wish there was more sort of like mythological philosophy, that sort of thing. And this is kind of what we're dipping into here.
Oh, that's true. That is true.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point.
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Let's head right into it.
Yes. And so we start off with Xenophanes, and he has this natural theology. And so
I always pronounced him Xenophanes, but I think that's wrong.
Probably Xenophanes.
Yes.
I think this is the one time I'm correct on the pronunciation here. And so he was really one of the first to attack the conception of the Greek gods, Zeus and Hera and Aphrodite, all of those types of guys. And he really kind of created this first philosophy of religion as opposed to this first philosophy of mythology that we've kind of seen in the past with the Greeks. And he really hated Homer. Homer and Hesiod, the poets that are responsible for much of our understanding of the Greek myths.
I don't know. Do you think he hated that, or he hated the fact that people actually took it seriously?
Yeah, it might be more that people took it seriously.
I don't know that he really had an opinion about how well written it was, or how good of a storyteller he was. But yeah, obviously he was hostile to the concept that there was an actual Zeus out there, and I thought on this chapter. It seems like we're reading more about things that you hear in present day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like he makes the argument that people conceptualize God in their own image, like an image of man.
That part was very fascinating because this is like the first almost comparative mythology that I've heard, because he looks at all these different civilizations and you see this group of people, this group of people has red hair. Their highest gods have red hair. These people have darker skin. Their gods all have dark skin.
Right.
And it's that kind of thing. And he realizes that, well, that's not how God should be. If God, is above humans, then God should not resemble the humans that created him.
Right.
And I thought that was very fascinating.
Yeah, with all their flaws and all that stuff too.
Yes. Because he saw the gods, they were all flawed. And that's really, he's just like, well, if they're God, they can't be flawed.
Right.
And he kind of also proposed a monotheism here, so very different from the Greeks. He says, one God, Lord over gods and humankind, like mortals, neither in body nor in mind. So one supreme God, not like mortals. He does say other gods. And the way that gods is used throughout the rest of this chapter is kind of interesting, because sometimes it just refers to like the stars.
Right.
And then it's interesting, but...
Yeah, I'm always fascinated by how over time we went from like animist to, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I always thought it was like animist belief, and then there was like these select few gods, like multiple gods, and then it seems like all human philosophy ends up with monotheism at the end. I mean, I guess not all of it, because there's Hindu and all that, but then there's a lot of people that believe in that. But
I did see throughout this chapter, it progressively almost became more and more Christian, which I thought was very fascinating.
Right. And you wonder how much influence these philosophers had on the early Christian religion and philosophy. Yeah.
And so then we move on to Socrates and Plato on piety. And Plato keeps up this attack on Homer and Hesiod. He was kind of disgusted that Homer's, poems were even taught in schools. He greatly discouraged people to believe in those things, because he really disagreed that gods would ever do harm to anybody. Because he said that God is good, does no harm to anyone, and they should just be eliminated from curriculum, Homer and Hesiod.
Yeah, you would think it would be pretty counterproductive to teach those Greek gods as authority, because maybe you'd want to follow some of their vindictive acts. It's like, well, if it's good enough for Zeus or all these different gods, then it's good enough for me.
Yeah.
Who are you to tell me it's wrong? Apollo, and I guess it wouldn't be Apollo. What are the other? Would have been Apollo?
Yeah, Apollo.
Oh, there you go.
No, yes. I can't remember.
I can't remember the Greeks and the Romans.
Is Hermes the equivalent of Apollo? Because if he is, then Hermes is the Greek one, and Apollo is the Roman. But I can't remember. I can't get it straight.
Yes,
Norse mythology is my thing.
All right. Yeah, but we need to fit in a future episode about Norse mythology.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. All right.
And so then we kind of move on to Socrates, and we get to the famous tale of him being executed for corrupting the youth. And it was really, he was corrupting the youth and encouraging them to not believe in these Greek gods, because in the city it was greatly, emphasized, this is the gods you should follow, this sort of thing. He's like, well, don't do that. That's not God. I just thought it's always an interesting story to hear.
Right.
And he also kind of brought up this other concept of this daemon, which was an inner divine voice, which he claimed was used to warn him off wrongdoing. So I thought that was kind of interesting. It's almost like the Christian concept of a conscience.
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah, it like internalized morality.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, I wonder, do you think that we're born with a conscience? Or do you think we develop it over time?
I think both. Yes.
Because there seems to be people that don't have one.
Yes. I think you could really degrade it. Like if you keep convincing yourself that bad things are good, then I think you'll eventually come to associate bad things with what is good in the world, and you'll be skewed.
You kind of have a reverse conscience.
Yes.
Kind of bizarro world conscience, like Superman.
Yes. And then he also kind of said, Socrates, that we shouldn't really pray for anything because we as humans don't know what's best for us. And so if we pray to the gods asking for things that we think are best for us, they're not really. And chances are the gods will give that to us, and we will not actually want that.
That's an interesting theory that goes back to my questioning whether God takes, the real God, not the Greek gods, takes an active role in our life. And if so, how?
Yeah.
And maybe you shouldn't ask him to help out because maybe bad things happened for a good reason, I guess. Isn't that what Socrates is saying?
I mean, I guess. I think he's just saying that bad things happen because we asked for them. I don't know if there's a good reason, but...
Really?
Well, yeah, because he's saying because we don't know what's good for us, and so if we're praying for things that we don't recognize are bad, they're just happening because we prayed for them, and the gods granted that prayer.
Oh, I see. So, yes, I
Yes.
understand the point. Yes. I apologize.
Yes. All right, moving on. And so then we're going to get into Plato's evolving theology. And throughout his writings, he kind of developed this idea of what God is. And so we look first at the Republic, and he believed that the summit of the universe was the idea of good. In the Symposium, it was then the idea of beauty. And then he also had this within the Symposium, I thought it was really interesting, in that humans crave immortality. And that is this craving that drives them to procreate and cherish their offspring, to strive for exploits that will go down in history, and to create works of art of everlasting value. I thought that was neat, and I kind of agree with that.
Yes.
That humans, we want to do these great things just to be remembered, to have some part of us be immortal.
Right, and then the question is, does our belief in a soul just a reflection of that desire to live on after we're physically dead?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who knows?
And then
I guess God.
Yeah, I guess so. And then in the Timaeus, this is kind of where he comes to his idea of almost a monotheistic God in a way. It was kind of interesting in that he believed that the creator God brought, he didn't create something from nothing. He just brought order from chaos.
Yeah, which made me wonder what created the chaos.
I guess it was always there. Do you need something to create chaos?
Well, I mean, if he's saying he's not something from nothing, that the chaos was there. Well, who created the chaos?
Well, that's kind of Aristotle's point. I guess we'll get to that in a
right.
minute. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm Aristotelian.
Yes. Aristotelian?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so he kind of set up this stages of ordering, which I guess is probably not too important to get into. But,
no, it's not.
Okay,
it's
moving
Plato.
on. Moving on to the laws. And in that, he kind of really finally puts religion very in the forefront of his philosophies. In that, in this ideal city in which he describes in the laws, religion is very prominent, and you could be very severely punished for being an atheist.
Yeah, don't be an atheist with Plato around.
Yeah.
He's going to kill you.
Yes, he will actually kill you. Yes.
First, he'll give you solitary confinement for 5 years.
But you better not believe in the Greek gods, because they'll probably kill you then too. You have to believe in the right ones.
That's right. Blasphemer.
Yes.
Blasphemer. 5 years. Back then, I mean, with that life expectancy, I mean, of your adult life, it's like half your adult life or something. And then if you do it again, it's death.
Yeah.
Wow. Dang, dude. And coming from a guy, I'm trying to, that would have been after Socrates would have died, right? Mm-hmm. So his mentor and hero was killed because he spoke out against the religious belief of the time, basically. And here he is proposing a utopia where they'll kill you for not following their religion.
Yeah.
Well, maybe he didn't. Maybe he thought it was ultimately a good idea. I guess I don't know. It's strange.
Yeah, and so then he kind of moves on. He kind of refutes atheism in this kind of argument that the soul comes before the body, and it is soul that causes development and transformation of physical things. The soul always takes priority over material things, which I don't really know if that really is a case against atheism. I mean, I'm not sure how that really proves anything.
Yeah, I don't see any atheists saying, "Oh yeah, you're right. The soul came first."
Yeah, it's like, it's weird.
Yeah, who says who?
But he also does kind of get into an interesting discussion over like why there's wickedness and evil in the world. And he says that the gods are good; they have all of the possession of all the virtues, but sometimes wicked things do happen. But that's not to mean that those people won't be punished. It's just a small part of like this divine plan in a way, and that maybe their wickedness leads to good things in the end.
Right. There's a lot of people that believe that to this day, and especially that they shouldn't judge because God has the ultimate judgment, and they'll get it in the end. God will take care of them after they die. They're going to hell.
Yeah.
Well, that's a lot of people believe that. Well, they call it karma. Karma's going to get you. Your mother's a firm believer that karma's going to get me.
Yes.
Yeah, she says that.
Which is interesting because she's a Catholic and
well, she
Catholics
doesn't
don't
mean
believe in karma.
She doesn't really believe in karma.
Yes.
But she like warns me.
Yes.
Like beware the Ides of March.
Yes.
Beware the bad things you say about people. Those things will happen to you.
She is the weird sisters of Macbeth.
Yes, I scoff at her.
Yes.
Threats of karmic retribution.
That's lovely.
I mock it, and then I wonder. But go ahead. I wonder if it's a good idea to mock the fates.
And so then
but I still mock them.
That's good. That's good.
Right. Okay. I'm done.
Okay. And so then we finally get into an actual case against atheism with Aristotle. And I actually really kind of love this argument. It's
really?
His idea of unmoved movers. And this idea was kind of adopted later by St. Thomas Aquinas with his 5 proofs for God, but I'm sure we'll get to that later.
I would hope so. Somewhere in this big volume.
Yeah. We're like a quarter of the way through.
That's correct.
That's correct, yeah.
Yes.
So this idea of the unmoved mover. So he kind of looks at everything and says everything that is in motion has been moved by something else. So a thing cannot just simply move itself. Some things appear to move themselves like animals and creatures, but in reality it's, an arm moving the rest of the body or leg moving the rest of the body. And, the soul kind of is the prime mover to everything. And eventually we kind of have to work our way back. Well, what set the earth in motion? What set the universe in motion? And eventually we have to get to something that is unmoving but moved everything else at the beginning. And I kind of really like that argument because, it makes sense. I don't think we can really go ad infinitum to, the beginning of everything because there has to be a start to motion, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And it's a good argument. It has to be a first cause.
Mm-hmm.
That's really his argument. And, of course, I guess it doesn't have to be a first cause.
Yeah.
What if it's just a big circular activity? Just kind of restarts.
Well, then what started it in the first place?
Nothing.
Well,
it's always been going.
Yeah.
What requires a start if it's a perpetual motion machine?
Well, everything else in the world has a start to its motion.
Yeah.
Why should the whole of the universe be anything different?
Well, because the perpetual motion machine just keeps moving along.
Fair enough, I guess.
I don't know that there has to be a first cause logically.
I think
why?
No, because everything is dependent on something else. You can't have something come from nothing.
Why not?
Because I said so.
Well, what if there was never nothing?
I think
it was always here.
Yeah.
God was always here.
Yeah.
Well, what created God?
Well, nothing. That is the unmoved mover.
Yeah, but what if it just exists? It doesn't have consciousness. It just is.
Yeah.
It just continues to be. Maybe it'll end. I don't know. Maybe it had a start and an end. Why does it have to have a consciousness?
It's really bleak.
Well, that's a good argument that he makes.
Yeah.
But
he does kind of, kind of describe, he says there's this eternal motionless substance. And so if there's a motionless substance, it has to cause everlasting motion. It must lack matter and potentiality, because everything that is of matter is made up of something and eventually, goes away, disperses. So it can't have matter, and it can't have potentiality. And this goes back to this difference between actuality and potentiality.
Right.
Because it can't just have the potential to do something. It just always has to be doing. It always has to be moving. And there's really nothing in the universe that does that except for God. And so, he describes this criteria and he meets it with God. It has to be the answer. So it's kind of this eternal motionless soul, and that is God.
Yes.
He moves everything.
That is his theory.
Yes. And I think it's interesting. I like it.
It is interesting.
Yes.
You're looking at me like I should argue with you.
Yes. No, I'm not.
Oh.
Yes.
I did like this passage. The details of Aristotle's long arguments are obscure and difficult to follow.
Yes.
Okay. That makes me want to read all his writings.
But I do like this this notion that God is always thinking of thinking. I thought that was fascinating.
Really?
Yeah. I thought it was interesting because
Why?
I don't know, it's just interesting to think of, because if you have something that is always in actuality, that has no matter, no substance, and is just permanent, for it to think of something would be to relegate it down to that level of that something. And so for God to be higher than everything, God can only think of itself. And if it's only thinking of itself, thinking is the only thing that it can think of. You're looking at me like you did not follow any.
No, I followed it. I don't understand why you like that idea. So God's just a perpetual thinking. He's not
necessarily agree with it, but I just think it's a fascinating line of thought that for God to exist, it can't be thinking of anything else other than itself. And if it's only thinking of itself, it can only be thinking of thought.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
I kind of like it.
Why? It doesn't make it doesn't make any sense.
It might not make sense, but I like the notion.
What is to like about it?
I don't know. It's just an interesting concept. Like,
I find it repulsive.
Really?
Yeah, that God can only think of thinking. What's the point?
I guess there really is none.
There would be no point in God just thinking about thinking. Well, you could think just about thinking.
Can you?
Yes.
I don't think you can.
You can.
I can't.
You can think about thinking, but you can't think about anything else. It's completely unproductive activity. You're thinking of thinking.
I might think about the action of thinking, but
No.
I cannot think of pure thought.
Yeah, you can.
How?
You just got to concentrate real hard.
I don't think you can. I don't think I can just solely think about thinking.
You can for a few moments. Yeah.
I really don't think so.
It's almost like a blackout.
I don't think that's what he's describing here.
Well, why not? Wouldn't it be like a blackout? If God is just thinking of thinking and not thinking of anything, he's not thinking at all. He's just thinking of thinking.
Yes. He's thinking about himself, but he's just thinking.
There's no thought.
There's a lot of thought. There's infinite thought.
It's no thought. It's not infinite.
It's so much thought.
No,
It's so cool.
No.
Yes.
It's not thinking at all. It's the lack of thought. Thinking of thinking is not a thought.
It's so many thoughts.
No.
Yes.
It is absolute zero. There's nothing there. He and you are saying that thinking of thinking is everything.
Yes.
It's thinking of everything. I'm saying the exact opposite. If you're thinking only of thinking, but you haven't actually thought of a thing, it is thinking of like a vacuum of anything at all.
It's the opposite of a vacuum. There is so much. It's just only you can think about thinking.
But you're not thinking about so much. You're thinking of thinking, not thinking of things.
Here, let me see.
Or even of thought.
So, he says that God must think of something, otherwise he is no better than a sleeping human, and whatever he is thinking of, he must think of throughout, otherwise he will be undergoing change and contain potentiality, whereas we know he is pure actuality. So that's kind of the basis of it. So to think of anything else, to think of a thing, that is to contain potentiality, and he's already kind of determined that God can have no potentiality. It always just has to be actuality.
Yeah, so he can't create anything. right? Because then it would be something new.
I guess that would make sense, yeah.
So that's why it's ridiculous. Of course God can create something.
But he has to think of thinking first.
He's already thought of thinking. And he thought it, and then thinking existed.
I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm not trying to defend him. I just like the idea that you can think of just thinking.
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Should we move on to Epicurus and the Stoics then?
Yes, please.
All
I don't think we got anywhere. This nonsense of thinking of not doing anything. I don't know.
So Epicurus, he really kind of has a very bleak idea of the gods. He says here that think of God as a living being, imperishable and blessed, along the main lines of the common idea of him, but attach to him nothing that is alien to imperishability or incompatible with blessedness. So he kind of says, it's kind of similar to like God cannot think of anything but thinking, but in that for the gods to be holy, they can't be concerned with humans at all. They just have to completely ignore them or else they won't be holy anymore. And I think that's just really kind of awful.
Well, I like this line. The sorry lot of humans is made worse, not better, by popular beliefs about the gods.
Yes, that's kind of what he says. That's kind of his basis for like really kind of hating the gods, is that he realizes that only the good things on earth come from humans, right? We only get crops from cultivating the soil. We only, get safety from building our own houses. And we only really attribute the gods to the really awful things like natural disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. We all look at those things. We say, well, that must be an act of God. And so he kind of looks at that and says, well, the gods kind of suck.
Yeah. Well, they did back then.
Yeah, they did. They
were
really did.
Evil, vengeful gods.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm kind of interested that these ancient philosophers were saying that gods were virtuous, because they really weren't. I mean, the stories of the Greek gods were just awful.
Yeah.
They're petty, vindictive, kind of arbitrary in what they would do to people. Yeah. But yeah, he's got a definitely he doesn't think much of the gods.
Yeah, no, not at all.
I wonder if he worried about getting struck by lightning or something by saying this stuff.
I mean, he might have, because he definitely believed in them. That was the thing. Yeah, because he...
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, because he says that even though they do all these terrible things, they must exist. And he kind of says, well, if we look at every civilization everywhere, they all believe in gods. And so it must be implanted by nature. If that's in our nature, there must be gods.
Right.
Even though
kind of like a natural law type thing. Where
even though there's differences in our beliefs, we all believe in gods, so there must be some sort of gods.
I wouldn't, that actually is both compelling and I don't think persuasive at all.
Yeah.
In some ways, it is kind of compelling that it's so universal for humans across the world to believe in some sort of higher being. But maybe it's just how we're wired. Yeah. Maybe it's just a physical reaction.
But he does kind of make it almost too universal, because he says that that they're perceptible only by the mind, but that there's as many gods as there are mortals. And so he says it's like such a universal idea that, if one person thinks of a god, there almost has to be a person or a god, for that person, which is almost kind of universal to the point of ridiculousness. But it's fascinating.
Yeah. That's an interesting argument, about universal truths and commonality between different societies and all that.
But then he also kind of says that theism is basically just introspection to moral theory.
Right.
And so that, when we look to gods, even though they do exist, he definitely believed in them, we're really just looking into ourselves and trying to figure out what is the best way to live a moral life, which is very similar to a book that I have sitting over on my nightstand right there, The Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell. Because he really goes into the psychology of things, points out like all these like commonalities between like the adventures of, famous heroes and gods and stuff.
And The Hobbit.
Not necessarily.
Really?
I don't think he goes into it in that book.
But, I mean, it's a hero story.
In a way.
How is it not?
I mean, I guess it is, but it's...
Isn't there a common theme in all hero stories where a person, has, well, like a lot of them, they have like some sort of calling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a departure, and then you kind of move into the unknown, into the wild, and you return, with a lot of benefit, is basically the thing.
Isn't that the story of The Hobbit?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, with Bilbo Baggins. It's not that awful one with Frodo.
That's the Lord of the Rings. Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, yeah, The
but
Hobbit
they're both
does.
The same.
The Hobbit. Oh, yeah, in a way. Because I don't think Frodo follows the hero story. I don't think the Lord of the Rings really does.
Well, it's not about Frodo. It's about Samwise Gamgee.
It's about Frodo.
And that guy is the hero. Because he comes back, gets a sweet lady, right? doesn't he have kids too?
Yeah, he does.
He comes back. He's a hero.
So
man.
yeah, I guess
he saved the world.
Yeah, Sam does follow the hero story. I would say that, but I think
that's why it's about him.
well, it doesn't have to be about him if it just follows the hero story. I think it is definitely Frodo's story. I mean, it might not even be
as he describes how Sam was the hero of the story.
Well, yes, but even though he is the hero, it doesn't mean he's the focus.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because Frodo's a distinct departure from the hero story in that, he returns only burdened. He doesn't get any benefit from the journey, and it's only, departing to a further land that he actually achieves peace, because he comes home to the Shire, his wound still hurts, he's racked with grief, and he's miserable, and he can only really become happy when he leaves the world for good, goes west into Valinor, the land of the gods.
Which is really death, the sweet release of death.
In a way, I guess you could look at it like that. Yes.
All right, back at where we were.
Yes.
Epicurus, are we done with him?
I'm finished with Epicurus.
Yeah, sure.
We move on to the Stoics.
Stoics.
So they believed in the gods, but they kind of take the opposite path of Epicurus in that they believe that the gods provided good things instead of the bad things. Just kind of the reversal of that, which is, I think, a better belief to have than Epicurus. And so really the basis of their belief in gods was this argument from design. And they kind of looked at the heavens, the stars move in a regulated way. Everything in the world is ordered. And so if we look at our own world, all of the ordered things have somebody governing them, right? So the well-ordered things have somebody in charge. So if the universe is ordered like that, there has to be a governing body. And so therefore there must be a god.
Yeah, I think that's fairly compelling.
Yes.
When you really look at like the complexity of life as we know it, and the more we know, the more we know how little we know about it. Down to the molecular level and everything. It's amazing. Anyway, go ahead.
And I think this is another theory adopted by St. Thomas Aquinas. So that's two of his 5, ideas of proofs for God that are really just originate with the Greeks, which I think is kind of interesting.
Look at you bringing out the 2 of 5.
Yes,
that's 40%.
Yes, I think so. And so there really has to be, this great mind in control of everything in order to have this governance. And they say that the world is independent of chance. So nothing really happens on accident. There has to be, they're all kind of cogs in this great machine because everything is so ordered. Nothing can happen on accident, which I think is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it goes
against, free will, but it's an interesting idea. And, if you really do follow that argument from design to a T, you kind of have to believe that there are no accidents.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess so. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the intelligent design argument.
Yeah.
Right there. It's started at as far as we know, those are the first people that really articulated it.
Yes. And so then there's Zeno, one of the Stoics, and he kind of expands on this idea. So he says that we always see that the rational is superior to the non-rational, but the universe is superior to everything, therefore the universe must be rational, which I think is kind of an interesting line of thought. I don't know if it 100% follows, but it's an interesting idea, expansion to the argument from design.
Right.
Then he kind of goes into the nature of evil. And he says, really, the only real evils are vices, or the opposite of virtues. And if we see these alleged evils, in the world, those either aren't real evils, or they are unintended but unavoidable consequences of providential action.
Yes.
I don't really like that. But
right. For a moralist like me, that rings hollow.
Yes. Yes. And so then there's Chrysippus, and he has this whole doctrine that I'm trying to find here. He says that divine power resides in reason and in the soul and mind of the whole of nature. He calls the world itself God and the all-pervasive world soul, or the dominant part of that soul that is located in mind and reason. He also calls God's the universal, all-embracing common nature of things, and also the power of fate and the necessity of future events. So it's really even further expansion, God is purely rational. God is the rational in all of the universe. Do you agree with that? You look like you're thinking very hard.
Yeah, no, it hurts. You're thinking so hard. No, I was just kind of thinking out. It's we always attribute positive values on God.
Mm-hmm.
Where there basically discounting, the bad things, the evil things,
Yes.
as if it's just, unknown causes or unintended consequences.
Yeah.
And I just think it's interesting that it's always God is the creator is always perfect.
Yeah. Which I think, yeah.
I don't know that it has. I
mean, that's kind of like my theory, that, for God to exist, or it has to be perfect in basically every way.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's logically necessary.
I don't know. Well, there's four more chapters specifically about God. There's one chapter about God for each of like the 4 periods that we go through here. So I think finally at the end of this, I might have a full answer to that question.
Well, I'm not trying to blaspheme.
Yeah.
God and Jesus and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know that it logically flows that the creator has to be good. Mm-hmm. Just trying to rein in your parade there.
Yes. And so then we kind of move on to divination in astrology. And this is really just about a philosopher and his brother. So we have Marcus Cicero and his brother's Quintus Cicero, and it's kind of this conversation between these two. Quintus believes that astrology and divination exist because he says that religion either stands or falls on belief in divination. So if you don't believe in it, then all of religion doesn't really exist. He says that we predict weather from nature, and we don't really understand why nature signifies this weather, but we believe it anyway, and so it's kind of the same for astrology. We can look to these things, and we predict the future, and we're right. We don't understand why it works, but it does. And if he says that if the gods know the future, and they kind of must, then they must tell us, or otherwise they wouldn't love us. So that's kind of his 3 arguments for the existence of, divination, how it works, prediction of future events. And then Marcus Cicero kind of combats that, and he says, well, science is always better. If you're sick, you don't go to a soothsayer, you go to a doctor. If you want to know about the world, you go to a physicist. You don't go to I don't know what the word he uses there, but the spiritual dude who looks at the nature of nature. And then he says, if an event is chance, it cannot be foretold. And if future events are fated, we cannot avoid them, and therefore gods are kinder to not tell us because we can't avoid the future events if they're fated. Therefore, the gods can love us and still not tell us the future. And then he kind of just says that astrology is madness, and you're an idiot for believing in it.
I think he won the day on that.
Yes, I think he absolutely did. I like his end point that astrology just kind of sucks because, it's wrong a lot of the time.
That's right. Although if it's vague enough, like, I don't know if they still have the horoscopes in the paper, but I used to read those when I used to get the paper many moons ago. And they're so vague as they can apply to anything. Well, your horoscope today is this, but look out for that.
Yeah, that's something that I've always noticed because it's kind of the same thing with like those personality tests that you take, and I think there is more science in them a little bit, like the Myers-Briggs test. You give like
those are
disagree or agree, but I still think it is still very vague enough that you can kind of agree with whatever answer you get.
Well, as far as the results of the test,
results of the test,
personality test. I guess it depends on how you define personality.
I think there's a certain group of personalities that you can get and you can still agree with. I mean, I think some of them you're kind of ruled out, and I think that's an improvement on the astrology and stuff of the past. But I mean, I still think
personality tests are much more reliable.
Yes. I agree, but I do still think that there are it is still very vague.
It's very vague, and the definition of the personality types are very vague on purpose. So they can't predict what you're going to do or what you're going to say or how you're going to react, but they can show your tendencies. Yeah. I believe in those because I think I have a certain personality type.
We took one in our theology class the other day. I got to the commander personality. I forget what the letters are, but it's
how many versions of the personalities are there? Like 5 or 4? Or
there's 16 total.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I took.
But last time I took it, I got debater. So they both kind of fit. So
what was the first one?
Debater.
No, the first one. You said you said
commander. I got debater the first time, commander just recently. So I think they're both vague enough that they both fit. So it's kind of that sort of thing.
Is that like a perfectionist and always wanting to be in charge?
I think so.
And argumentative?
I think so. I think that's exactly what it is. That's for both of them.
I did a personality thing a little while ago, and it was kind of spooky how accurate it was. But anyway, And it wasn't not necessarily flattering. But it did help me because it also described other personality types. And the point of the exercise was to kind of recognize your personality type, also recognize other personality types and how different personality types communicate and react differently to different inputs, I guess you say. And it's actually helped me out a lot because I'm not the type of person to really be aware of how other people will react to the things I say.
Yes.
And so, if I'm able to stop and think about it, I can articulate my position a lot more friendly. Yes. Because I'm like, it's logical. Just do it.
Yes.
But that doesn't seem to work out as well as you might imagine. Anyway. Yeah. So on to, we're going to go to Plotinus.
Plotinus.
Is that what you call him?
I have no idea.
I thought it was Plotinus. Maybe you should look it up.
Sure.
We
should probably honestly look these things up before we go spreading these lies on the internet.
Well, that one guy in France that listens to us religiously
every episode, like a few hours after it's uploaded.
He's trying to learn English, and he's listening to this on his way to work, and so he's going to mispronounce half the English words because we're so stupid. Yeah. And always. When he goes to America to talk to people, they'll be like, you talk funny.
Yes. Have you never heard of Plotinus?
Yeah.
Plotinus?
I don't know if that'll come up in conversation.
Well, maybe not. But who knows? It is a French guy listening to a philosophy podcast, so maybe the people he talks to will come up in conversation.
Yeah, we're assuming it's a guy. It could be a gal.
Oh, I guess that's true. Yeah. You
could have a fangirl out there from France.
Oh, yeah. All right. The Trinity of Plotinus.
Yeah, I know this was really interesting.
This was fascinating.
And I remember reading about this a long time ago, just how similar it is in some ways to the Christian Trinity.
Mm-hmm. I really loved reading this.
Yes.
And so his system was that kind of summarized by Bertrand Russell. He says the metaphysics of Plotinus begins with the Holy Trinity, the one, Spirit, and soul. These three are not equal like the persons of the Christian Trinity. The one is supreme, Spirit comes next, and soul last. And so he kind of sets up these three arguments for these three different things. And I think it's just one of the most fascinating things we've read in this whole book. He says, so the one is very similar to the Platonic God in that he is descended from the idea of good. He's simple, he's undivided, he's all of a piece, and he's unique. He's the most real thing that there is, and he's beyond being, he's beyond knowledge. We can't fully comprehend him. And he's always around us, and he is necessary for our existence. So like if the one ever stops thinking about us, we just cease to exist.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed reading this part too. I thought that was fascinating. Yes. Yep.
And so then he kind of moves on to the intellect, which is slightly below the one. And this is very similar to the Aristotelian God. And he's pure activity, and he can only think of all of the Platonic ideas. So it's kind of expanded from thinking of thinking to thinking of all of these perfect ideas.
Right.
And he's complex, and so he's so very complex that he depends on something a lot more simple to even exist. And so he depends on the one. And he kind of has this world of intellect that is, just, his domain in a way. And, thinking is itself desire is kind of this idea that he sets about this, and that knowledge is just satisfied desire. So anytime we want to think about something, we're just desiring information. And then he says intellect emanates from the one. And so, it all kind of depends on the one. And I really like this idea of the intellect. I think it's a fascinating description of God.
Yes, I agree.
Yes. And then last is the soul, and he's very similar to the Stoic God. And he's this arrogant desire for independence. And he's a restless succession of... so the restless succession of soul is time, which I thought was an interesting idea, is that the life of the soul is its passage from one episode of living to the next. So it's really only through the soul that anything is put into motion, and anything flows through time. And it's immanent, it's the controlling element, it's immaterial, and it links the world to the senses. And so it looks up to intellect, and it looks down to nature. So with the soul, we can look at nature, and we kind of pass it up through the soul to intellect, and we can kind of determine, what everything is through our senses. And so, of course, that intellect depends on the one, so it all goes back to the one. It's this whole hierarchy of succession.
Yeah, and I think when he talks about the interaction between the soul and the physical body is a precursor to some things we're going to discuss before. How does that interaction occur? And he gives an analogy of a guy standing in the sea up to his waist in water, and you're both in the water and out of the water. That'd be kind of like similar to the soul being in the physical realm and the intellectual or the spiritual realm. Interesting.
And so really kind of to summarize the whole thing is that the soul kind of governs the world wisely and well in its motion, but the wisdom comes from the intellect, so it can't do it on its own. It doesn't know wisdom without that intellect. But then intellect, in its complete complexity, it cannot exist without the purity and the simplicity of the one. And I just think that's a very neat idea of a trinity. Very, very fascinating concept of God.
Yeah, and it was really kind of groundbreaking, it seems, at the time.
Because it kind of combined everything.
Right.
You didn't have to exclude the teachings of one school of thought. You could say, well, they all kind of work together,
Right.
These are all just the many facets of one God.
Right.
I just think that's an incredible idea to come up with.
So he basically said, you're all wrong and you're all right.
Yes.
But
you're both in the water and out of the water.
Yeah, I am the only one that figured this out.
Yes. Go me.
All right, so I thought that was a really, really good discussion.
Yes,
of,
that was my favorite chapter by far.
Good.
Yes.
Well, I think Western philosophy gets better over time.
Yeah,
because it gets more and more real, and of course gets closer to our scientific understanding of the world too, because they were at a huge disadvantage. I mean, he's coming up with a theory of the Trinity, in a sense, hundreds of years ago, and it starts trying to figure out, okay, how does the soul interact? And of course, they didn't know about the Big Bang theory. They didn't know about black holes and how the time interacts with the physical world. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Got any other closing thoughts about God?
Not really. No. No.
Nothing? You got nothing?
Nothing.
Right.
I don't have anything.
No, I think this was a good chapter.
Yes, very interesting.
Yes.
Fascinating. Love the chapter.
Excellent.
Yes.
That's all you got?
That's all I got.
So which one was your favorite? Plotinus? Or Plotinus?
I mean, yeah, kind of just because it combines everything else. Combines, kind of, it really does feel like a good closing to the ancient section of the book, because it really kind of, all of the other philosophers' ideas of God kind of depend on their own philosophies about everything else, about physics, about ethics, about, metaphysics, all that sort of thing. So it really does feel like a good conclusion to that sort of section of the book.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a kind of an all-encompassing theory. It doesn't have a tremendous amount of assumptions. Has a couple assumptions and builds from there.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yes.
But I do like I wish there was more about the cynics and.
I just don't want to hear about the skeptics ever again. But I feel like we're gonna get more of them moving on through time.
Yep. All right.
All right. Is that it for today?
Yes.
All right. Well, that has been Unlimited Opinions. I've been Adam Bishop.
And I am still Mark Bishop.
But you're still saying still.
Well, someday I'll stop being Mark Bishop.
I've been thinking about setting up like
I thought you were thinking about me dying.
No. I'm thinking about setting up like a Twitter or an Instagram for the podcast, just to kind of, I don't know.
I think that's a horrible idea.
You think that's a horrible idea?
No, that's a great idea. That's fine.
Idea.
Do whatever you want to do.
Okay. We'll see about that.
Yeah. Well, yes.
Okay. Okay. Is that all your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I am actually cutting back from all social media as much as I can.
I know you have been.
Yes. Because I don't know that anyone out there that I don't know well deserves to know what I know.
That's a lovely attitude.
The only exception I have is this podcast, because you enjoy it. And so I consider this a conversation between the two of us, and the less people know of it, the better for me. But if you want people to benefit from our conversation, more power to you.
All right. That's lovely.